Hello and welcome to my long-term honest review of my 2015 Kawasaki Versys 650. Firstly, this is my bike. I bought this Versys just over a year ago and I've ridden it about 16,000 miles. Secondly, I'm not going to rattle off all the stats because having owned a few bikes, I've come to realize how little those performance figures actually matter. Also, I assume you already know the numbers and just want to know what this bike is like to ride and own. Ready? Well, let's go. If you're anything like me, you want to cut to the chase. And if you're like me, you only have two questions that really matter. One, would I recommend this bike to someone I know? Yes, I would. And two, would I buy it again? Yes, I would. Fit and finish are actually pretty good, especially at this price point. There's nothing cheesy. The paint is really quite good, and I've been complimented on it a few times. What does a BMW or KTM cost again? You could do a lot of riding with the difference in cost, not to mention the cost of ownership. And a 7,000 mile oil change interval is pretty nice too, but it did take me a little bit to get used to that. 2 oil changes, both tires, the rear one just got done again. I did do the chain and sprocket. I'm not 100% sure this was required. I think the chain was going, but the sprockets were fine, but I decided to replace them anyway. I did add heated grips, which I put on all the bikes that don't come with them. I did throw on a top box, but that's mainly for when sexy wife wants to ride with me. Gives her the backrest and a little bit extra storage. I've also added a front fender extender to get a little bit more coverage for the lower parts of the bike. In back, I've done 2 things. One is to attach this flap, which actually does a really good job of keeping the shock clean. But I also added a rear hugger simply because I think it looks cool and I had a little bit of extra cash after selling something on eBay. And I have been playing around with a windscreen extender, mostly for trying to figure out the audio while filming, since the helmets I wear aren't super quiet. It's a pretty spunky little bike. It's not what I would call powerful, but you can jump out of corners and pass cars when needed, and it'll get you into trouble quickly enough if you let it. It leaps when you crank the throttle, and the power band is between 5 and 7K. Up to 8,000 is pretty much the sweet spot. I tell people, if you want to feel its soul, ride it like a sport bike, not a big touring bike. She likes to wail a bit, from time to time indulge your inner idiot when the road gets twisty, and resist short shifting. If you let the RPMs drop below 3,500, 3,000 coming out of corners, it is going to lug a bit. This bike inspires in the corners. Toss it in hard and get on the throttle and the Versys will respond. If you're a brake hard kind of person, I recommend using a lot of rear brake to keep the bike flatter, as if you just use the front brake, it is going to dive quite a bit. On twisty roads, the Kawasaki Versys 650 is quite nimble for such a tall, upright bike. When I'm particularly in the mood, I slide forward against the tank and hang off the inside as the bike rails. Flip up over to the other side and repeat. All in all, my advice is to trust this bike. Corner it firmly and with confidence, and you'll love it. If you corner it tentatively, unsure, and timidly, it wallows about. Remember, it thinks it's a sport bike. They work. Next subject. Okay. They aren't great, but they aren't crap. My biggest issue is with the lever feel. It's a bit mushy. I think that could be because of the ABS. Most of the time, you don't notice it or care. But if you just sit there and pull on the lever, you're going to think, this should be more solid feeling. Braking power is fine for most riding conditions, and I can modulate it okay. But I do think I'll try some double-H sintered pads when I get around to replacing them. See if I can get a little bit more of a positive bite. I'm 5'10", and I find that the wind protection is very good. The windscreen in the high position and my chest feels nothing, my helmet only a little. Arms get a fair amount of air from around the sides, which is good because I stay cooler on the hot days, even though the windscreen is blocking everything else. In the lowest position, my upper chest and helmet get a bit more air. I actually rode most of the summer this way in an attempt to stay as cool as possible. A little side note, I prefer naked touring over full screened touring, so in some ways the wind protection is almost too good. Wind protection for my hands is actually really good, better than I expected to be honest. These hand guards do a great job and allow me to run my summer gloves a lot further into the off season than I could otherwise. But with the added heated grips, I'm now able to have a much broader range of what's acceptable for my hands. They don't freeze like they used to, and it's just pure wind hitting them, and the glove is the only thing protecting it. Big thumbs up for the hand guards. I really like the seat more now than I did a few months back. I like to ride what I call speed touring or sporty touring, with a little hanging off in the corners. The Versys seat doesn't make that easy. You have to slide forward against the tank to manage it. But you can slide back against the pillion bump to increase the reach to the bars and enjoy a flatter, wider section of seat for the longer cruising sections and increase your time on the bike, being comfortable, able to move around a little bit. Like a lot of bikes, if you just cruise the freeway in one position, the seat is going to suck pretty quickly. I've never had a bike that cruised well on the freeway, but that's not the kind of riding I do anyway. I only hop on the freeway when I need, usually for an hour or two, just to get somewhere. I tend to plan 7.5 hour days on the bike, and the Versys works perfectly for that. Stop occasionally for some photo ops, get some lunch, enjoy the scenery, and you're good to go. This is the weakness of the Versys. At least at above 70 miles an hour, steady on the freeway. It just isn't great. The bike seems to transmit a lot of vibration at that speed. It's not a buzz, but it feels more like the kind of turbulence-induced vibration. I'm not exactly sure what to call it. The answer to this is in the gearing, so that when you're at a highway cruising speed, the engine is running more slowly. Only a few hundred RPM makes a big difference. The consensus seems to be either one tooth off the front sprocket or 3 teeth off the rear sprocket, and it brings the bike right into the sweet spot when you're doing around 70 miles an hour. And when you're trying to do that for a couple of hours, it makes a world of difference. Anytime I have the what bike conversation, I answer it the same way. Buy the bike that turns you on. I tend to follow it up with, buy a bike, ride it for a year or two, and really get to know it, and if you don't like it, sell it and buy another one. Heck, even if you do like it, sell it and buy another one. There are so many different kinds of bikes out there, why not try to experience them? I normally prefer what regular people say about bikes more than the professional testers, only because of the context and experience of what they deal with versus what we deal with can be quite different. But I do like this quote that I found from Motorcyclist. It's playful and fun and eager to go. The light steering, fantastic turning radius make it easy to whip around and go back and check that out, or stop for a photo op that you missed, or go down a road that you haven't been down before. I could lean back a little and ride like I'm sitting in an armchair, or lean forward and be a bit more sporty, which of course brings me to the cliche that this bike really is versatile. I'm not the kind of person who says that you have this bike or that bike in a category. This is a touring bike, this is a sport bike, whatever. It's more about what you do with them. I've toured on my Triumph Bonneville, and I've ridden on the track on bikes that are more sport touring. To me, every bike is a sport bike, and every bike is a touring bike. It's just up to you and what you're doing that weekend. The Kawasaki Versys 650 eats miles. It's warm on cold days or cool mornings, has good gas mileage, and can carry the stuff needed for a few days' night stay on a trip. It's just such a good all-round package. Maybe it's not the most passion-enrapturing bike I can envision, but it's a fun little scoot, and I can ride 30% longer and far more comfortably on it than I can on any other bike that I've owned.